All right, the other thing that we can use line for is as governing lines. Lines that help us block out our subject. Lines that create patterns throughout. And the thing is, when you are looking at your subject, in this case, the bird, you can use verticals and horizontals to map out its proportions. So here's where things like a skewer become helpful, a plumb line, or even your pencil. I'm often using pencils. Now, if you've been with me for a while, this is going to be old hat because this is the process that I always use when I'm blocking in something. I decide what the directional line or the action line is, and then I start to look at the verticals and the horizontals. So if I wanted to say, well, that's the top of my bird, and this is going to be the bottom of my bird, I have now two horizontal lines to use as a reference. I don't often do this part, but I could put in a vertical line, and the vertical line becomes arbitrary. This is where the plumb line becomes very helpful because you can use it by just letting it hang to create an absolute vertical line that you then say, this is the vertical line that I will use as a reference throughout the piece as I'm blocking it in. So, but it also works with a skewer. You're just creating the vertical line yourself. Pencil works as well. So if I wanted to look at this bird, I need to choose a point along the vertical, along the vertical as the line that I'm going to choose at a right angle for this. The reason why I would not use the gesture line is that this can move. This is not a stationary line. These are pretty much stationary lines. Like I said, in real life, they're invisible, but when we're drawing, they're used for mapping. So let's see. I'm going to use his eye as a point, and I'm going to judge. So amongst all these verticals where this could be, I'm going to actually choose this as my vertical line and say, so there's my action, and there's my vertical. I'm just going to say this is where I'm going to put his eye. This does not mean that's where his eye is. This is just to get us started. It's blocking in. And then it's kind of figuring out a halfway point. So if I'm saying roughly this is my rectangle where my bird is going to be. If I'm just judging based on my eye, and at this point, this is what we do with these guidelines, is this is like a fourth of the way in, this halfway, here's 3/4, here's the full box right here. So let's say that's the halfway point. Then you start to look, what else do you see on that halfway point? You see the back end of the auriculars are right here. So I can put that curve in. Let's see, what else? I can see that whatever that angle of the back end of the auricular right up here, that's going to mimic the back end of his skull. So this is all part of the governing lines. You are figuring out patterns, and amongst the horizontals, the verticals, and the diagonal lines. You're just looking for repeating patterns. We haven't even started measuring yet. usually when we're doing Wonder-Filled Wednesdays, we're jumping in and measuring pretty much right away because we're moving fast. But when you're taking your time, you can just start to look at horizontal lines, diagonal lines, and look for repeating patterns. So I see that that's the back end of the auriculars. That's the back of his skull. If I am, again, looking at the back of him, I'm seeing a slight diagonal right here. And I'm seeing that slight diagonal mirrored at his throat. And just by eyeballing it, his throat is just like a little bit beyond where we think his eye is. So I'd want to put that line in. So I've got this and this, I've got some horizontals, I've got my midpoint vertical, my quarter vertical. And so you're just kind of going through and mapping out based on what you're actually doing is kind of a grid. Because if I were to go ahead and put in another horizontal that would be important to me, about a third of the way down, right here, is where I'd say the horizontal line from his, the underbeak, not the part that hooks around, but that underbeak is kind of right there. So when you're looking at something in life or a reference, if you start to look at what do you see as horizontal lines? What do you see as vertical lines and the landmarks that these would indicate? You start to kind of build yourself a little grid. Does this look like our bird? No. Are things in the right place? We don't know yet. But we've got kind of some basic guides, and from there, we could make adjustments. So if you're using the skewer, it's the same as when I was using my pencil. When you're using the plumb line, it becomes a little bit more exact because gravity is helping you create that vertical, but you can also use your plumb line to plot your horizontals as well. So this is a very handy tool to have. Okay, does anybody have any questions so far in terms of lines used to kind of map out and these governing lines and looking for kind of the repetitions, patterns that are occurring? Because actually when I'm looking, okay, so that's like that, but then here's a pattern right here, and we can actually see where that pattern continues. There's another right here with his shoulder. It's kind of the same. So does that make sense to kind of look for these repetitions and to plot things out on horizontals and verticals? Let me know. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Now, the other thing that you can use that help is a lot of people will go ahead and look for the curves. And I mean, you can do that too. There's a curve here. There's a nice curve here. You can look for curved lines. That's not something I personally do in terms of, I do look for the curves. I don't draw them in as curves. And that just is, that has to do with the way I see. I don't know if it's because I'm myopic. I don't know if it's because my glasses are as thick as Coke bottles. So things get distorted, but I find it's much easier to plot out a curve by using the straight lines to plot it out. So like I'm seeing that curve of the beak, but see, I would not actually put in the curve. Now, if you're good with circles and you can draw them freehand, and you're good with curves and you can draw them freehand, then have at it. do that.